Finance and Investment Committee to order. And the first item on our agenda is to approve minutes of our last meeting, please. Thank you, Commissioner Jernigan, seconded by Commissioner Sandler. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We're ready for our investment report. Our county trustee, Mr. Beatty. Good evening.
Good evening. The LGIP rate stayed the same. It did not decline over the last month, which was good. We had 2 bids over the last month. One of those, we accepted the 6-month bid at 0.75, and the next one, all of our bids except one were below the LGIP rate, and that rate was for a year, and it just seemed too low to tie the funds up for a year. Hopefully things will look better in the days ahead. It would just drop substantially over the bids we've gotten over the last 60 days, and so just hope maybe that was a lull, and we'll see a little more activity. It just didn't seem prudent to accept that, and all the rest of them were below what we're receiving from our liquid funds.
They're so low, most of them didn't even bid. Motion to approve.
They're going to start charging the store the money.
We do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Beatty? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Anything else, Mr. Beatty?
No, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you will locate your fund condition report, our finance director will begin with the development tax report.
I see that we have met our estimate, so we met our estimate last month, so we're a little ahead. For March, we received $96,750, bringing our total to date $1,123,500.
Are we ready to move on to cash balances?
Okay. At the end of March, we received we had $202,234,677 in total funds, with $177,589,000 in operating funds, $24,645,000 in borrowed funds. The projects that we want to close out tonight. $813 under the Correctional Work Center, Juvenile Detention, and the jail expansion renovation. There's $8,651. The work today was completed. We'll be transferring that and some more money into the Smyrna County Clerk Building project, but that'll be later.
So move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Stanley. And seconded by Commissioner P. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Now, do you want to make some comments about your revenue sheet?
I don't think that there's anything that I really need to bring up that we hadn't already talked about. I mean,
Okay, so
I've highlighted some things. The only fund that's causing concern is the drug control fund, when the revenues are not coming in. So that will cause some problems in this budgeting process for next year.
I'll give you a few minutes to take a look at it in case you have a question for Mrs. Nolan before we move on to the next item. Okay, let's move on now, please, to our insurance report from Mrs. Miller. And Mrs. Miller, would you please introduce our guest?
Yes, this is Jim Kelly, who's with us this evening from Socopa.
Well,
in case there's any questions when we get to that piece of business.
And Mrs. Miller will begin with the financial report.
Right. You have the usual reports in front of you. We do have 9 months now of the current fiscal year to juxtapose with the last fiscal year. And you can tell by looking at the self-funded per employee per month that it's trending upward just slightly. It's not too bad though yet. Care Here is the next block down. It is also trending upward. It's trending up a little bit more out than the other one. In fact, it's up 7 months out of the past 9. But when you combine the two of those together and you get the per employee per month for the entire all core benefits, again, you can see it's an upward trend, but not too bad. And I'll show you that on the next page. Our GASB liability stands at $22.8 million through the month of March. If you go to the backup, you'll see that I've added a line at the bottom. I usually talk about this, but I thought it might be helpful to actually see it now that we've got enough months to start considering some of this data credible. You'll see that through 9 months of the fiscal year, if we compare that to the same time period last year, we see a demonstrated trend on our medical plan at 1.5%. So that's an excellent trend number. Like I said, it's good news, bad news, in that this year we're only at 1.5%, but last year we were at 17. So we're up that full 17 plus a little for this year. You can see on the Care Here costs, they're up 7.4%, and then when you meld all of that experience together, we're up 1.8% year over year for the time period elapsed. We move on to the work injury fund performance. Overall, our claims are down from last year. You can see the comparison month to month. And then the second box is our workers' comp versus our on-the-job injury costs. And you can see that they were up significantly for workers' comp in December and January, and that's when we closed out some old workers' comp claims. And now, if you look at the most recent months, we haven't had any large settlements, and it makes sense because the workers' comp costs are down and the OJI costs are coming up. And that's what we would expect to see. On the next page, in the yellow box over on the left-hand side of the page, you'll see that we are currently at roughly 78% year-to-date of our claims dollars for the same time period last year.
You want a motion?
Please.
I move to accept the report.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorne.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Green. Any discussion or questions for Mrs. Miller relative to the financial report? Commissioner Shea.
I'd just like to throw something out, and maybe just in sometime in the future, we get some more info, because, and that's, I've read about, and this is in relation to our GASB requirements for retirees, that places have started the trust funds, and it's, the states have allowed them to do it. And I guess we don't have that in this state that we can do it. We can. We sometime, not maybe after the budget or something like that. Could we maybe get something on that to explain it in layman's terms, what it could mean, what we would have to do to do it? I guess we'd have to put in something at the beginning and then let it hopefully.
Trust document has to be approved by the state. Funding board approves those. But yeah, we can do that.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Now Mrs. Miller will present a recommendation for Cigna for medical and dental renewal.
Right now, and this is simply for the administrative fees. We are in the third year of a 3-year guarantee for our medical administration. That guarantee was flat on all items except for the stop-loss premiums. And usually on a stop-loss premium, you would see an increase of anywhere from 10 to 15%. This year, we can maintain our limit at $380,000, and they actually lowered the cost by 2%, which was a little bit of a victory. So we could save a little bit of money if we renew as is. On the dental fee, we're on a second year of a 3-year guarantee, and again, those are fixed fees for those full 3 years, and so again, it's the same fee. So if we looked at this, just this page, we could see that we'd actually see a little bit of savings this year if we renewed as is. However, I want to show you an alternate, which is the next page, and it's the same guarantees. However, on our stop-loss premium, they offered an opportunity to save an additional from the renewal to $955 down to $880, so 75 cents per employee per month savings on our stop-loss fees if we were to purchase 2 new disease management programs, and that would be Healthy Babies and Cancer. And I started looking into this and determined that the additional cost of those 2 programs was actually less than the savings that they're offering. So that's a good news story. And then we would also be able to save a small amount of claim dollars if we were to purchase those two programs based on the management of the claims. And roughly then the total savings would be about $82,000 versus the $10,800 from the scenario one. And let me explain to you why I think these two products would be a good choice for the county. These are both advocacy programs. They're not as much disease management as advocacy programs, and that's demonstrated in the lower claim savings. Usually you would see a much higher claim savings when they're just trying to manage those claims. But in this particular instance, they are trying to advocate for the people who have these conditions. The Cancer Care Support Program runs at about 35 cents per employee per month. And what's wonderful about this program is it helps the members who have been diagnosed with cancer throughout their entire treatment. And then they also try to work with people who are healthy now to try to maintain their health. Cancer can be a very scary disease, and there's so many different types of cancer and different types of treatment that this is a valuable product to get multiple sources for education and information for our members who are diagnosed with the disease. And they've listed all of those various sources of information and resources for those members. But then also what's also important when you have cancer is to know that you have access to the right providers, and they help you walk through that process, and they offer ongoing support from case managers and nurses who can help folks to understand what the various options are. Then they also, if you are a cancer survivor, they try to help. The program will help work with you to manage your recovery and maintain the fact that you're a cancer survivor. And then in the worst case scenario, they also offer end-of-life support for those folks who don't survive the disease. On the Healthy Pregnancies, Healthy Babies program, again, it's an advocacy program. It costs 37 cents per employee per month. And this is to try to help us get better results on our pregnancies. Right now we have 13 high-risk pregnancies. The cost is $1.1 million so far in our large claims. So that can show you the investment that we're looking at here. This is a program, again, it's an advocacy, and it's information and helping people to have the right types of opportunities available to them if they become pregnant. This particular program is an incentive-based program, so that helps to drive enrollment. If a woman who is pregnant enrolls in her first trimester and completes the program, then she gets $150 back. If she enrolls in her second trimester and completes the program, then she gets $75 back. This program works through an initial risk assessment to identify possible health risks during pregnancy, and there's several follow-up assessments. There's 4 additional interventions, 5 months, 7 months post-delivery, and 3 weeks postpartum. So they're talking to these members throughout their entire pregnancies to monitor if there are issues that they need to be concerned about. And in addition, at the postpartum assessment, they're going to screen for depression, which can be a big problem, and any problems with the baby at that point. Do they need help with breastfeeding and that sort of thing? So again, it's information, it's advocacy for these members, and I think it would be a good addition to what we have right now to try to help our members through some of these more difficult times. The price is right; they're paying for it in all of, they're giving us more in a discount than they're charging us for the programs, and so. The recommendation out of the insurance committee was to go with the alternative scenario, which is the purchase of the 2 new products, and pay for that with the savings on the stop loss.
Move to accept that.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Bullen, seconded by Commissioner Schaefer. Commissioner Fitty.
How long would the prices stay in place here?
Well, at least a year, but they don't go up too much year over year anyway, but they're at least a year for this.
But you think that the cost, like these 13 pregnancies, was around, what, $85,000 a piece?
Right
in
up.
that neighborhood.
And of course, some are much less, some are much more. We have one $500,000 baby out there right now.
Okay. But this, if we had this picked up, it would cover us on that, or how would it affect the cost?
The idea of this program is to try to avoid having
people
high-risk
that get there.
pregnancies. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, we're covered by virtue of our stop loss. We would fund the claims up to that $380,000 level, and then once they reach that level, the insurance, the stop-loss insurance kicks in. What this aims to do is to avoid that type of claim.
So that helps them also.
Right.
Is this something we reevaluate in a year and say, okay, or is this something that, I mean, you think is an ongoing type thing?
It would be an ongoing type thing. However, you could evaluate year over year simply by looking at your large claim experience to see if there had been some mitigation. Now that's a very volatile claim
This year
experience,
is
but
gonna
you ought to
be
be able
different
to see.
from the next
Right.
year and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So, I mean, you really can't tell from that.
So this would go in, this would actually be a 7-1 addition to our plan, and that's how our large claims are accumulated anyway. They're accumulated 7-1 to 7-1 instead of being a calendar year. And so it would be pretty easy to tell year over year if you could see much of a difference.
But there wasn't an offer to extend this past 1 year this time.
Not this time, no. But again, historically, I haven't seen large increases on these types of products.
Any
And
further
keeping in mind
discussion?
that next year's a bid year, I imagine we could get it probably close there again.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Yes.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. The next recommendation from the Insurance Committee is to award health insurance dependent audit to Socorro.
Right, and Mr. Kelly from Socorro is here with us if we have any questions that I can't answer. Let me describe to you what a dependent audit is. This is a plan where we actually go through and we check the eligibility of all of our dependents to make certain that they should be on our plan. Could be several cases where we have dependents who are inaccurately enrolled, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to be certain that we're only paying claims out on folks who actually have an eligibility to be in our plan. The timeline of an audit like this is about 5 to 6 months. This particular audit will take place in 2 phases. We'll do the county first, and then we'll do the Board of Ed later on in order to account for the summer months. There's going to be a complete review of our current eligibility criteria, and then if we need to do something to tighten them up prior to the audit, then Socorro will help us to determine that. The entire process is going to be managed by a project manager, so you would have an expert making weekly checks and being certain that things are going the way they're supposed to. All communication pieces will be customized for Rutherford County. In fact, it'll look like it comes out from Rutherford County with input from the insurance department and other departments throughout the county. There are several stages. The initial letter goes out. It will include a cover letter, county-specific eligibility definition, required documentation chart, in other words, what they can submit in order to prove the eligibility, and frequently asked questions. Then there will be an interim disposition letter sent to employees who responded but maybe didn't respond correctly or completely. Then there's also an interim non-respondent letter, which is mailed to employees who have not responded to the initial letter. That's sent out about 4 weeks after the initial letter and reiterates their requirement to please respond. A confirmation letter will be sent to employees who have successfully responded to the audit. And a final disposition letter is sent to employees whose files were still incomplete or from whom there was no response as of the close of the audit. And that advises employees of the specific dependents who will be terminated and what date that will happen. Throughout the process, like I said, there's going to be weekly status meetings. The audit will include an amnesty period, an audit period, and a silent grace period for those folks who just really have a hard time getting the information in. The county will receive an analysis of our results and will get advice on how to, what the best practices are to avoid any similar issues in the future. Now, we reviewed 4 different companies. We had a finalist committee select 2 of those, and we brought those 2 forward to the insurance committee, and Socorro was the selected company. But let me go through just a few of these. I won't read through this whole thing, but just a few of the really important things that we felt were important. One was the number of years providing this type of audit, and Socorro had 12 years doing that, which was more than any of the other vendors that we looked at. The frequency of the audit reports, the other vendor was just weekly, and Socorro had online real time. And why this is important is because we can see updates as they happen, and especially when you get down towards the end of the audit, it's very nice to go in and see who hasn't completed it. We can drill down to a department level, and we can have experts in each department that are able to go in and look and see how many of their folks still haven't completed the audit, so that they can go out and speak with these folks if they need to in order to make sure that this is completed. That just gives us a little more ability to touch the employees and help them to complete this process. Another big thing was the call center hours, number 9. Secova offered 24/7 service to their call center, whereas the other vendor was only Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It was felt in the insurance committee that that was very important for the shift workers, like the ambulance service and the sheriff's office, those folks. Having calls recorded, they both did that. That was important. They both had good public sector experience. However, Secova just completed the state of Tennessee's audit, so they're obviously very familiar with the type of population that we have. Collecting dependent Social Security numbers through the audit process was critical, and the reason for that is because there's a federal law that's going to become effective 1/1/2011 that says we will have our dependent Social Security numbers, and so in order to add that in, we thought doing it through this audit would be the easiest way, and Secova will do that for us. The methods of member interface: they can call in, they can mail, they can fax, and they can even upload documents online. So there's several different ways for our members to satisfy the requirements. And then one of the biggest things that came out during the finalist presentations at the insurance committee meeting was the on-site training sessions. And Aon offered 2 hours, and Secova has told us they are included as needed. So whatever kind of training help we need, they'll be here to help us with that. Mr. Kelly has shared with me that they have a lot of projects still ongoing with the state of Tennessee, so they have a lot of boots on the ground, if you will, and so they're able to respond to any of the needs that we may have that way. The next page are the financials for the 2 companies. And you'll notice if you get down to the total project cost, this is where we had a little bit of a differential, and the first vendor was less expensive than Secova was. In fact, they came in at about $17,000 less expensive, which, if you think about $400 per hour for training from the other company, equates to about 44 training hours for Secova. But then we also have to remember that the 24/7 call center is available, as is the real-time data reporting, which the other vendor did not have. Even though the expense is greater, I think the services justify that. But when you start looking at the return on investment for this type of project, the estimated ineligible dependents, if we say we have 4%, which is a very conservative estimate, didn't the state have something like 8? Yeah,
Yes.
8% for the state of Tennessee. So I'm very conservative here, saying we'll only have 4. Of course, I'm thinking we run a pretty tight ship, but I don't know, so we'll see. But the first year savings, if we only have 4%, would be roughly $862,000. So the return on investment isn't in percent, it's in hundreds of percents. And so the return on investment through Secova would be 8 times the investment that we had to make in order to do the audit. So the next page is our ranking. And you'll notice that this was extremely close. Secova edged out on the weighted ranking. There were some things that we liked better for the other vendor and some things that we liked better for Secova. The Aon, the other vendor, had publicly traded financials, so that was easier to see on that. And then in addition, of course, they were less expensive, so they got the nod over Secova on that. Public sector experience, though, Secova had more, and indeed that state of Tennessee kind of led us that direction. Secova has a little bit tighter process. They both claim a pretty good employee focus, in other words, trying to advocate for the dependent and help them through this process. Aon had a soft landing, a dependent referral. We called it a soft landing, but what it is they have a company out in California that would actually work with dependents who were eliminated from the plan to try to find other coverage. Secova will do, what they'll do is they'll pass out material to these dependents who are taken off the plan, but they don't have an agent, if you will, that would help them to find coverage. And then the post-audit solutions were very good for both of the companies. So once you did the straight average, neck and neck, but the weighted average, Secova won out. And finally, the last page of this is the differentiator. So what was it that caused us to look at these two companies? And you'll notice that with Aon, that soft landing opportunity came up. Their primary call center's in North Carolina, so we kind of felt like maybe they could speak Tennessee. But they are the consultant for the state of Tennessee, but they didn't do the audit because they recused themselves. But they did have some negatives. That no real-time reporting was a big deal, and call center from Monday through Friday only 7 to 7. Sokovia recently completed the state of Tennessee audit. They have a lot of experience with public sector. Their call center, again, 24/7, data availability of real-time. Training costs are included in the total fees, and that allows for us to have flexibility in our employee communication. So the bottom line was that the insurance committee voted on this, and they voted 7-3 in favor of Sokovia.
Move to accept the insurance committee's recommendation.
Commissioner Jernigan, seconded by Commissioner Jernigan. Commissioner Schaefer.
Explain again about the amnesty period and silent grace period.
The amnesty period is a period up front in the audit where we tell people this is coming, and if they'd like to go ahead and take their dependents off now, they can. You usually find about half your folks in that period, and then you find half that they just can't prove that their dependents are eligible.
Okay.
But usually you'll have about half of them come off there. The silent grace period is to help the employees. You know, you tell them when they have to have this stuff in, you're going to have some percentage that just doesn't do it, and so that gives us a little extra time to go around and try to grab those folks and say, come on, we need to get this done.
Okay, so there's no penalties for them if they
The
don't
the penalty is because their dependents will be taken off the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, if you have an amnesty period, you really kind of need to have a or else, and that will be part of our strategy as we plan this.
Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Yes.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. Mrs. Miller now will present a recommendation from the insurance committee to amend our insurance plan document.
We have a member, a young member, who suffers from, excuse me if I can't pronounce this, bilateral profound sensorineural hearing loss. And that's profound deafness is what it is. And the child has a cochlear implant to help recognize sounds in speech. It's been in place for several years. It has helped her communicate successfully, but it's several years old now and is in need of updating. And the cost of the update is roughly $8,400 for this, just for this one procedure. A cochlear implant is a device that provides stimulation directly to the auditory nerve. And what it does is it doesn't result in restored hearing for the recipient, but it does allow the recipient to perceive sounds. And currently that is excluded from our summary plan description. Our plan description reads, no payment will be made for any charges for hearing aids and examinations for the fitting of hearing aids. For the purpose of this plan, hearing aids shall include any procedure or device designed to restore or enhance the covered person's ability to hear, including but not limited to audient bone conduction, electromagnetic, and or surgically implanted devices. And that exclusion would include cochlear implants. A possible change that we could make to help us if we opted to do this would say, no payment will be made for any charges for hearing aids and examinations for the fitting of hearing aids, including but not limited to semi-implantable hearing devices, audient bone conductors, and bone-anchored hearing aids. A hearing aid is any device that amplifies sound. This exclusion would not include cochlear implants because they transmit sound, they don't amplify it. So that would allow us to include cochlear implants. Now, the prevalence of this is quite low, actually. Actuarial estimates for our population are 2.5 children and half of an adult, so 0.5, total of three altogether that would require this. The average cost for the implant runs around $55,000 with all of the associated services. And annual estimated costs to us would be right about $52,000 per year if we added the additional coverage. But you can expect that these costs would be reasonably offset by reduced necessity for speech and language therapy, hearing therapy sessions for our schools. And those can be necessary at a rate of 3 times per week and up to $100 per session. I'm sorry, that's still a medical cost. But then, in addition to that, the Board of Education currently provides special education services for children afflicted by this disability, and there could be significant savings on not having to do that either. So I did check around with other municipalities to see what they do about these types of services. Metro, Davidson, and Smyrna both cover cochlear implants as part of their surgical benefit. It's subject to deductibles, out-of-pockets, and co-insurance. And Murfreesboro is like we currently are. They completely exclude the service. The Insurance Appeals Committee that heard this appeal originally approved it, and then when we took it in front of the Insurance Committee, they unanimously approved this addition.
So moved.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Jernigan. Discussion. Commissioner Schaefer.
So if we hit the actuarial insurance tables, okay, each year, right now it would cost $165,000 for 3 people to have these implants.
Well, the idea is that you'd have 3 people, but they might not all need the implant at the same time. Once
Yeah.
the implant's in, it's in.
Yeah.
And then in every several years, you have to do some updating on it. So the cost of the implant itself is $55,000. And if we did, in fact, have 3 people, then you're right, we'd have to do $165,000. And then the next year, it wouldn't be so much because those 3 people would have already had it. But
it costs us $52,000 a year.
right. Mhm.
So
And that's
basically, in 3 years' time, we pay for 3 people.
about
That's
that, yeah. I will tell you, this is the first time we've ever had this come up. So I don't know if the actuarial estimates are going to hold true for us, but
The estimates that you look at on the cost offsetting, say these people didn't have to have the special training and all that, what was the dollar figure you came up with on that?
well, like I said, if they have to have hearing therapy sessions, those can run, it just depends. I can't give you a hard, fast dollar figure. Those run at about 3 times per week and can be $100 per session. So if you've got a child who needs three sessions a week for a year, or you've got 300 times 52, you're going to be starting to talk some dollars. But the bigger expense is the cost that the Board of Education has to provide for the special ed for these folks. So I didn't have an actual dollar figure. I can't tell you how much it would be, but they would be reasonably offset.
Any further discussion relative to this motion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
all.
Gentlemen, let's turn please to section 3 in our notebooks, and we will begin with general fund budget amendments. Our first budget amendment is from the Correctional Work Center. Mr. Samandri. Good evening.
Good evening. We requested approval for the following budget transfer. Amendment to funding for the miscellaneous gas account to cover estimated gasoline usage for the remainder of the fiscal year. We're requesting a transfer from the miscellaneous gasoline to the work center gas line of $6,000. And we're also requesting approval to transfer money within the budget from the captain's line to pest control, utilities, employee insurance, and undesignated fund balance, and requesting $120,000 to cover our contractual expenses with our health plan, our Southern Health Partners, and the ABL account. They cover our commissary, food service, and also our laundry accounts.
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Sandlin,
I'll
and
second.
seconded by Commissioner P.
I do have a question though. Did we not transfer some gasoline last month also?
I think this
Not
is
for
our first time.
Not for
Wasn't
this
this,
account.
wasn't this account? All right.
Somebody at the same time.
Well, I remember that we hadn't been
Right,
out
we
picking
might
up
have done
litter, and
within.
we started back on that, so our gasoline use is definitely gonna go up, so.
The Southern Health Partners, is that for, services for inmates or employees?
Inmates.
Inmates.
Employee covered under yours.
We have a ceiling of $20,000 for outside incurred costs such as the hospital and et cetera, and we had a
Couple of
couple of
injuries.
injuries that have exceeded that appreciably.
Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ewing.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Thank you,
Chairman,
sir.
before Mr.
Salandy.
Salandy, please, I'd just like to mention one thing. I'd like to thank him in Correctional Work Center and also the city of Laverne because they got together over spring break recently and straightened out that area again on the ditch in the lower part of the hillside of Laverne High School. And everybody up there appreciate it.
That was our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We know your number.
Mrs. Snyder, a budget amendment from a drug court.
Yes, sure.
Hello.
Good evening.
Okay, due to the next year's budget, I was going to have to lay off a person, told that person I was going to have to lay off that person June 30th or July 1st. And he went right out and found himself a job, which I was very proud of for doing so. So this is to compensate for the comp time that he had. Since I do not have an overtime line item, we had to make an overtime line item so that we could compensate him for his comp time.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Bullen, seconded by Commissioner P. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan, Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ewing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you, Ms.
much.
Snyder. Mrs. Nolan, from an unemployment compensation amendment.
This is a request for $16,000 to the unemployment compensation line item to come from the undesignated fund balance.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Jordan. I need a second.
I'll second it, but I was thinking, what for?
Okay.
Unemployment, it's when somebody leaves our employment,
We're
Well,
for the
choice but to
unemployment
fund this.
line.
We're self-funded.
and we're self-funded, so.
Well, explain more how these people left. Were they cut? Are their jobs eliminated or?
I'm not quite sure which people are on here, but, I mean, if they leave for a reason, I mean, like, if we terminated their services for
Yeah.
a reason, then they are not eligible to receive unemployment. Sometimes they leave for a reason, and the state determines that they still qualify. And so, because we're self-funded, we still have to pay. A lot of these people, we've heard, the
Even if we
benefits have
aren't
extended.
self-funded, if the state determined that we'd still have
We
to
still
pay,
have to pay.
right?
Well,
Oh, yeah.
but
Yeah.
we pay as the people claim, as opposed to paying a premium in. That's what we mean by, we self-pay.
Were the people that are gone, were their positions filled? There was none eliminated, right, is what I'm saying. Or there's none left open?
Do you remember who all are on here?
Well,
I think
I'm-
some of these might be
Yeah, I'm
even
not
from
asking
last
for every-
year, because of the federal government allowing the benefits to continue to be extended, so. Is it 50?
Then
Well, it
we-
just seems
Yeah.
it's
Most
like,
of these people were terminated for what we thought was valid cause and reason.
Okay.
And
The state.
we refilled those positions back, but we've had a dispute and we've been overruled in some of these.
all right.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yeah.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ewing.
Yes. The next item is just a correction, an amendment to correct a line item that we approved last
last
month.
month. It should have, the amendment for the 7,300 should have increased custodial supplies and not other supplies and materials. So this corrects that.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Sandlin, seconded by Commissioner Jernigan. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. From the ambulance service, they have received checks for services at special events.
$4,500, and they request those funds to be appropriated to overtime, payroll, and related benefits.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Bullen.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Jernigan. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. Gentlemen, turn to Section 9, please. And we have a contract or an agreement between the Tennessee Department of Health for funding for this year's program. Ms. Garrett. Good evening. This is your annual...
Yes, this is our annual contract between the State Department of Health and the county. It is for the current budget year that we're already in. It's just a little delayed. Historically, it gets to us a little late, yeah.
Motion to approve contract.
Commissioner P. I did not get the second, sorry. Thank you, Commissioner Jernigan. Discussion?
Is it, what's the figure
This,
that we're getting, the total figure?
this amendment down end where the county agrees, this is our agreement, the county's agreement with the state saying how much we're going to fund locally. You know how we have the two budgets, the
Right.
state-funded budget and then the county, but this kind of is telling them this is how much, or the agreement between the two, how much we're going to be funding locally.
The next question then is, how does this relate to last year's?
That's
It's
pretty much
roughly
the
the
same.
same.
It's
The
the
last 2 or
same.
3 years, it has not changed, except gone down a tiny bit.
Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. The next document in this Section 9 is also the Tennessee Department of Health, and I am assuming this is just for information. It's already been signed, and this is the funding to help fund part of Ms. Garrett's salary. If you feel comfortable with it, we'll just consider this for information purposes. Is that okay?
And Dana's got one more thing.
Oh, do you have something else?
Yes, one more thing that I hadn't given to the agenda. We received some funds that went through the whole council for H1N1 to handle the vaccination of that in our community. And the state has decided that through federal requirements that we need to spend some of that money that they gave us to get some things to prepare for our next emergency and to replace some of the things that were damaged and used during this emergency. The way the original state amendment came through, it had it mostly in salary and benefits and other contracted services. So we've asked the state to give us a revision of this and move it from the professional grants to supplies so that we could get a few of those things, chairs, tables, an extra refrigerator for vaccine storage, those kind of things. And I'd like your permission to, because I haven't gotten what I need from the state. It's due any minute now, but of course I didn't make it before this, to present it to the full commission next week.
Move to approve.
Second.
Well, once we get the approval, do you remember how much the total was?
That we're moving
That we're
around.
moving.
I think it was 56,450.
56,450?
Yes.
So we'll have that number by next Thursday night?
Yeah, I have
And
it all
hopefully the
official.
approval from the state. We didn't want to amend our budget until we had approval from the state to amend the contract.
Right.
As long as we have a number by next Thursday night.
Right, and then
we
we'll
can
have
approve
it,
Yeah.
we'll have
Yeah.
the amendment corrected by then.
And if we don't, well, then I'll just start over in May.
We were hoping to have it to you tonight.
Today, that was my goal.
Well, the motion was just to let us hear it at full commission.
Right.
Yeah.
Commissioner Jernigan, that was your motion, and Commissioner Schaefer, that was your second, correct?
Let me tweak them.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yeah.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, staying in section 9 of your notebooks, you will remember at County Commission last month, we had a resolution to approve application for a grant for a domestic violence investigator. Tonight, we have the grant contract. Mr. Martin, Chief Deputy, Ms. Nelson, Regina, yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening. If you will give us just a quick review of some of the details for this, please.
Okay, this grant is a 3-year grant for a STOP grant. It's called, it's for violence against women. And the county match is 25% and the grant is funding 75%.
And this will be in next year's budget. It starts.
It starts July, it would start July 1, yes, that's correct.
And it's consistent on 75% for all 3 years. It doesn't stair step down.
Correct.
Just stays the same and goes away after 3 years.
Our portion each year for the 3 years is 14,607. Is that right? That's correct, sir. And I think we mentioned it last month, I don't know, but depending whether we get this grant or not, then that service may not be able to continue after 3 years, you know, depending on the grant coming in, whether we want to take the full boat at that time in that 4th year. So whoever is hired in that position, you know, I might want to let them know about that. That's correct. I think it's a good program. Maybe we can carry on and continue getting the funds.
Motion approved.
Thought we had one second.
Seconded by Commissioner Sandlin.
Sorry about that.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a general capital projects fund budget amendment. And you will remember that our finance director said we were closing out a couple of line items when she went through the cash balances. You're going to see that here with this budget amendment.
And this is a request to, as I said, $813 from the Correctional Work Center to close that out, $8,651 for the jail expansion, and then $5,536 from the ambulance station project to move $15,000 into the county clerk Smyrna office.
What reason we come up with needing this extra money?
We're still within the projected budget. We just never funded all of it. You know, sometimes you hope that you're going to have some savings. So we're still below what our project was.
The projected project cost, we just never moved the full amount of the money into the project.
Will this 15,000 cover all of the
I
rest?
think so.
Yeah.
We've added a little just in case there was something that came in, that might come in.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner P, thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Jernigan. Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ely.
Yes. Gentlemen, if you will turn to section 8. Our finance director is going to give us some information regarding a debt refunding and the resolution to go with that information.
You're familiar with doing refundings. We've done those before. In this first paragraph, it talks about which issues that we're considering. Again, a lot of it has to do with the stars, the moon, and the sun all aligning appropriately for it to happen. Meaning our investment rates from the proceeds and then what our borrowing rate would be. But this spreadsheet, if you would jump to the spreadsheet, so I can show you, Robert, is this one?
This one.
This is all of our debt, all of our bonded debt. That in the gray are the non-callable portions. The ones that are X'd out are not being considered. Only the ones that are in the dark box, the boxes, those issues, would be the ones. It's anticipated in not doing one emission, maybe 2 emissions. The authority in the resolution gives us the opportunity and the flexibility to do it in 1 or more emissions. And of course, the reason that we do this is to help us in debt service payments, the goal being to reduce debt service. The resolution also gives us the flexibility to either negotiate the deal or sell it competitively.
You just want to sort of give them a,
Well, no.
not yet. Okay.
It's kind of like when we did a few years ago, where we had to give county mayor and finance director authority, so
Right.
whenever everything got right, you could pull the
Right,
trigger and.
Right. And the reason why he wanted to do more, and Sam will be here at the commission, he wasn't be able to hear tonight, but he will be here at the full commission, is sometimes, you know, you do benefit from economies of scale. You know, some costs that you're going to have to do, whether you do one issue or you do 3 of them.
What are we looking at doing total, and what's it gonna save us total, and what's our long range benefit?
Well,
we don't know.
Well, there's a projection. We just
do have
asked-
some projections, but we're not going to do it unless the savings are of an amount that would be, after you paid your expenses of all of this, to save probably in the neighborhood of 2% or more on what we're refunding.
Is this something we need to just, I mean, are we just for our information right now, and then you're
No.
gonna bring him back next month?
No, we're bringing him
Okay.
to the full commission, because a
Oh,
lot of
Thursday.
times,
Okay.
Thursday, because there are instances over time that it's, you know, this Montgomery and, who did I tell you? Williamson. Montgomery and Williamson both just went through some of their refundings. On Monday, it was a good day. One was going to sell on Monday, one was going to sell on Tuesday, but the market started moving, whether the investment rate or the borrowing rate, you know, started to move. So they still did the first sale, and they did generate, you know, good savings. But as the market was moved, they pulled the sale on the second day because, you know, it started falling apart. But they held it the third day. So it's one of those things that if it's ripe, I mean, I hate to keep going back to the stars, the moon, the sun, but things have to line up for it to generate the savings. You know, for us to even make it worth our while to do it.
Who is monitoring that for, sir?
Sam.
Sam Cruz.
So this is a resolution you're wanting us to approve to give you permission to do this?
Yes.
I so move.
Second.
Commissioner Brewer, seconded by Commissioner Peake.
So we've got 6 different, 6 different bond issues from '01 through '06. They could get combined into as few as 2.
And
Am I
right,
understanding correctly?
and you
Where
might
would
not
go
do
on-
all of it.
How will we go on term? This '01 is a 20-year note that's going to be paid out by 2021. Are we going to go another 20 from current and carry
No,
that to 2030?
you
Or
know,
we gonna
typically the ones that we've done in the past,
stay with the
they
same?
stay the same
Okay.
length.
Well, if you combine an '01 and '02 and '03, then you're going to have to hit somewhere in the middle. But we're not.
Or you might do these issues to be in that time zone, and this
But
might be
we're not
those
gonna
last
go
ones.
with a 9-year.
We're not
hold
going to
another and carry it 20 years. out
Exactly,
from
we're
here.
not going to do that.
I couldn't support that.
I
That's-
agree.
yeah, okay.
I agree. And that's what I was going to say. If you look at this look on top, you've got there's 3 issues that we've done refundings. They're titled as such. Do you see that? Refunding. Those were bonds that had a refunding issue.
And they stay with the same term, basically.
That's all the ones that I've seen that they've stayed. And see, the ones, this first column, that 2,500, that in the gray was non-callable. That was not included, but all those that were callable were included in the refunding. So you can kind of just see those refunding and see it's about, of course, these probably refunded some of the other ones, but I can look at it and say it didn't extend. See the 4/115? That's not any further than what these that got refunded.
As long as we're not tacking an extra 10 years on.
And I
or 9
agree
years.
that we're not extending it.
Well, 2 out of the 3 you're not even considering, correct? According to this. I mean, on the refunding, there's one
Well,
of them.
you see these, you've got two years that are called.
Only the ones in the square boxes.
But you got 2 right here marked out that's got refunded on them.
But
Right,
already-
they've been refunded.
They've already been done. That's the reason you don't do them.
So what we're looking at is keeping the length of time, basically what it is. And if there's, say, 200 million in these 6 entries, then you're looking at after all fees and all this, that we would come out with a $4 million savings. That's 2% of.
Well, 2%, yeah, that's
2%
sort of
of
a
200 million.
threshold that
basically
you're looking for.
Well, it's worth doing a little paperwork for $4 million.
It's a lot of paperwork, and he's got a tremendously complicated spreadsheet on this.
And still in doing, the first time that we would have cost if we were, was to have them rated.
I have a question. Who's doing the spreadsheet, your department or Cruz?
Which, I did this one.
But the one
Cruz-
he said
Cruz
is
is-
Sam has
tremendously
got
complicated.
Sam has got the
booklet.
He's got the big one. He's got the big software.
He's doing all of those.
So that's what we're paying them.
Well, they don't get paid unless this happens either.
Well, I understand, but
Right.
gotta,
Right.
Yes, sir.
gotta be ready.
He's the one who's monitoring.
If it
He's the one
happens,
that's
they
pulling the
get paid.
pieces together to see if it makes sense for us to do.
But this resolution will authorize the mayor, the finance office, in conjunction with our finance financial advisors, to decide on the timing and whether or not the timing is right. It benefits us because the motivation and the final result is to reduce our debt service payments.
Yes.
Make sure that all 21 commissioners will understand that night you're not gonna do it unless it makes sense to do it.
Absolutely, we're not.
I agree.
Opportunity arises, so.
And roughly, when are you, if this is all approved, when are you anticipating it'll happen?
If you remember, we did one of these issues, 6, 7, 8 months ago, and still hadn't.
I think we'll start serious review of this as soon as we get approval to do it. When in fact, he's already done some review of this.
Which is
The
why he's-
rates are moving right now, so I mean, the window of opportunity could close soon. The short-term rates are moving.
I have one more question. So how long does it take Cruz and his organization to fill this out and be ready to go?
I mean, he can do, every day we're probably reviewing this. And we'll be changing iterating on a few of the components,
You
which
said
may.
it was complicated to fill out all of that. How long?
That's initially.
Initially, how long does that take them to put that
I mean, I
together?
think he could probably do it in a week or 2.
Yeah.
Or less,
If he sees this
Ask
going
those
through
questions
the
next
process,
Thursday.
He's working on it already.
Oh, yeah.
He's working on it right
Yes.
now.
He's already done some preliminary work on this.
Okay.
So you just start moving a few of the pieces and see what that does, and you look at what the rates are doing every day.
Well, any time in the past that we've done this, we've been able to save ourselves quite a bit of money, so I mean, it's certainly worth looking into and giving him the opportunity to look at it if the stars and moons align and the opportunity arises, so.
We do have a motion and a second. Yeah. Did we include the signs of the zodiac in there? Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bullen?
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes.
Commissioner Sandlin?
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Yes.
Commissioner Ely?
Yes. Is there any other business that come before the committee? Let me remind you, please, at the bottom of our agenda tonight, you might be sure and check your calendar. Our next meeting will be April the 29th. That is when we will get an overview of the budget and the work that the mayor and the finance director has done with the department heads to this date as of the 29th. And remember, that is at 5 o'clock because there's some end-of-the-year school programs that some of you need to attend, and hopefully that will make it easy for you to do so. So April 29 at 5 p.m.
Just one quick thing, get it right tonight. This Saturday in Laverne at the Rescue Squad on Gamble Lane, which is right off the old Nashville Highway. It's one of the best deals you ever get on a ham breakfast. Meet a lot of people. So everyone is welcome to come out for this fundraiser. That's in Laverne at the Rescue.
Anything else that needs to come before the committee? Okay. Gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.